Have you ever felt like giving up? Have you ever wondered, is giving up quitting or is it surrendering? Stay tuned. I've got 3 tips about what the difference is between quitting and surrendering, and be sure to hang on for the last one. Matt Woosley tells a story when he was a kid that really illustrates the difference between quitting and surrendering. It's all about jumping off the high dive. Have you ever had that dilemma? Am I going to really go up that high, and am I really going to jump? That was his dilemma as a kid, and he finally decided, I'm going to go to the high dive and I'm going to jump off. And he did. He climbed up the high dive and he got to the top, and he was scared, petrified about jumping. And he started to walk back, to come back down the ladder, and his friends were at the bottom giggling at him. So he went to the end of the diving board and he jumped. He talks about that's the first time he really remembers the joy of surrendering, because there is a difference in quitting and surrendering. Definitely a difference. Quitting would have been walking back down that ladder, fearful, regretful, resentful, disappointed, ashamed. Whereas the surrender was in the letting go and just letting it happen and jumping off the high dive. It's the difference between quitting and surrendering, and honestly, it's quite a elementary look at quitting and surrendering. But I want us to look at 3 tips that help us know the difference between just giving up or quitting and surrendering. When I think of quitting, I think of it being wrapped in negative feelings, whereas surrendering is a release and freedom comes. A great example in the Bible of a time of surrender, and it is incredibly powerful. That's when Jesus is in the Garden of Gethsemane. He's had the Last Supper with the disciples, and he's getting ready to be betrayed. Yet he takes the disciples into the Garden of Gethsemane, and he asks his 3 closest ones to go even farther with him. And he is going to pray. And this is how it's recorded in the book of Matthew. Particularly, I want us to focus on these points as we think of quitting and surrendering. It's Matthew 26, starting with verse 37. He, Jesus, took Peter and the 2 sons of Zebedee along with him, and he began to be sorrowful and troubled. Then he said to them, my soul is overwhelmed with sorrow to the point of death. Stay here and keep watch with me. Going a little farther, he fell with his face to the ground and he prayed, my Father, if it is all possible, this cup may be taken from me. Yet not as I will, but your will be done. And after he'd returned a couple of times with the disciples, he returned a 3rd time, and he said to them, are you still sleeping and resting? Look, the hour has come, and the Son of Man is delivered into the hands of sinners. Rise, let's go. Here comes my betrayer. And within the story, when we think about surrendering, we see these 3 points that are critical when we think of surrendering. The first thing we've got to do is accept what we are powerless over. For many of us, most of us, a lot of us, majority of us, we spend a whole lot of time worrying, trying to control things that we really have no power over. And this is going to be a very small example, but an example of this is, for example, gas prices are really rising right now. Now, I can be concerned about that. I can be concerned about how I'm going to pay for gas. But for me to be angry at someone I'm powerless over gas prices going up. I can't control it. It's beyond me. What I can control is how I respond to that. So the first part of surrendering is accepting what we are powerless over. We're powerless over people and institutions and events that we can't control that. But yet, if you're anything like me, I spend a whole lot more time concerned about what I can't control than what I can control. So accepting what we are powerless over is the first step in surrendering and letting go, not in quitting, but in surrendering. It's that, you know what? I can't control gas prices. I can't control how much I'm spending on other things. I can't control if I travel a far distance. Like, I can control that. But quitting and surrendering is accepting what I'm powerless over. The second step is that I need to engage with the one who has all power, and that's God. God is all powerful, all knowing, all present. And in order to surrender, I need to be engaging with God. I need to be talking with God. I need to be engaged with his word, what he thinks, what he believes, because he's all powerful. And that's where our power comes from, is accepting that we aren't all powerful, but we have a God who is. That's transformative. Now, the third step, the third tip, is choose to live within our powerlessness and God's power. So how do we do that? How do we live within our powerlessness, knowing that we are not all powerful, that there's a lot going on in our lives that we can't control, but yet to be in God's power as well at the same time? And the relief, that is surrender. What we can control is our thoughts and our actions. The truth is, we can't control our first thoughts. Our first thoughts happen. But what we do with the second and the third and the fourth thought, that's where the surrender comes in. Of if that first thought that comes to mind is, how am I going to pay for gas? That's a reasonable thought. The second thought is, I'm not going to blame everybody. I'm not going to get angry. I'm not going to post a bunch of stuff on social media. I'm going to go to God and say, okay, God, help me think this through. What do I need to do? And the truth is, gas prices may be what's going on now, but there's so much in our lives that we are powerless over. There are events, there is death, there is broken relationships. There are all these things in our lives that we are powerless over. And so how we surrender is by releasing that to God, because God is big enough to handle it. I'm always amazed because when I think of quitting, I think of a kid having a tantrum, because sometimes that's how I feel. It's like, I'm just tired of this. I'm tired of being an adult. I'm tired of dealing with this stuff. I'm quitting. I'm done. I'm quitting. Yet what surrender looks like is, God, I'm tired. This is hard, and I need you. And whereas quitting is much more of a clenching of the fist and a throwing down, surrender is much more of an offering up to God, because he's big enough. He's big enough to guide us. Doesn't mean everything goes the way we think it ought to, but yet we're not carrying more than is ours to carry. Jamie Atten, who is a disaster researcher, like, who knew that even existed? That's pretty interesting. So his research is about disasters, and he tells a story. He's got an article in the Washington Post, and he tells in that article about the day when he was 35 years of age and he found out he had stage 4 cancer, colon cancer. And he talked about he was living his disaster. He wasn't researching someone else's. He was living his disaster. And he tells about this moment when he's taking the trash out one day and he's praying that prayer he'd been praying, God, heal me, heal me, heal me, God. God, please heal me. And all of a sudden, the prayer shifted. And the prayer shifted, if I'm not going to make it, take care of my wife and kids. And he said that in that moment, that was the most challenging prayer he'd ever prayed in his whole life. But it was the first time he truly experienced a spiritual surrender, because he was no longer holding on to the results. He was saying, okay, God, I don't know what this looks like. Doesn't mean we can't pray for healing. It doesn't mean that we don't believe in that. It means we get out of the results department and we offer it up to God. And we choose to live our lives in surrender and not quitting. Because surrender is life-giving. Surrender is freeing. Surrender is God. there is a prayer that I'm familiar with. It's called the third step prayer, if you've ever heard of it. And I've amended it a little bit, but this is how it goes. God, I offer myself to you to build with me and do with me what you will. Relieve me of the bondage of self so that I may better do your will. Take away my difficulties so that victory over them may bear witness to those I would help of your power, your love, and your way of life. God, I surrender. Thank you for watching this video. Be sure to like this video, subscribe to our YouTube channel, and check out the rest of the content on our channel.